Good morning, everybody. Thanks for taking time out of your valuable day to join our webinar. Today we'll be looking at phishing, quantifying the risks and looking at some mitigation techniques. So just so we're all on the same side, when we're talking about phishing, phishing can be achieved via email, phone calls, direct messaging over social media, or to be honest, any form of communication which is unsolicited. But in the most part in our industry, we're seeing that it's email that's based, and that's what we'll be concentrating on today. So phishing is one of the most successful methods of attack. It's a lot easier than combating network security defenses. Why? Well, they go for the weakest link, and that's the human, and it's widespread. HMIC last year said it was one of the most phished brands in the world, and we're all used to seeing phishing emails in the news that are specifically after money. But we have seen it for darker reasons, like the Fancy Bear spear phishing attack, gaining entry to the World Anti-Doping Agency to leak data out. We've got some interesting information about spear phishing, or whaling as it may be called, and this is where phishing campaigns are set against to look like they've come from CEOs or financial directors, and they're targeting these phishing attacks. As I say, this is known as spear phishing. These are done because they're carefully crafted, and as it seems personalized, it's a lot more authentic. It's very difficult to say no if you believe the email that you received has come from the CEO. And unfortunately also, the UK are pretty gullible to these type of phishing attacks. So we are seeing a big spike in the UK because the cyber criminals are getting leverage on the spear phishing in the UK. So, you know, they will keep trying for it. Why is this on the rise? Well, it's basically the abuse of the online information. Taking advantage of what's out there. I'm sure you all have LinkedIn profiles and pages that can be looked at from your company, and it's not too hard to find out who your senior people are or names within your organization. And even sometimes this information can be popularized on websites by identifying users and even their roles within the organization. So social engineering, which may have been quite hard in the old days to find out this information, now becomes ever easier because of your online presence. And it's prolific out there. Checkpoint released some stats in September 16 to support this. It's quite hard to believe that there's 205 billion emails sent every day. But what's more concerning is nearly 40% of every attachment contains malicious files. And 34% of all the links that are in emails are malicious. I think that's the really interesting stat here, that 70% of all malware out there is installed via an email. So this was why the bad guys do it, and this is why they do the phishing. What's interesting on the malware now, that quite recently that PDF malware has overtaken executable malware. So it may well be that your users are well aware that they wouldn't run an executable if it received in an email, but are they aware that a PDF can just be as dangerous, and in fact more malware is distributed that way? And we've got even more alarming figures. The reason the bad guys do this is because people do click on them, and they click on them quickly. 30% of every phishing email gets opened, and quickly, within the first hour. It is the #1 delivery method of email, attachments and malware. And Verizon in the US calculated that the average successful spear phishing attack cost $1.6 million, so it's not insignificant. And 1 in 3 companies have been victim to CEO fraud emails or targeted phishing. So now we're going to take a bit of time to look at a couple of examples of how phishing attacks can work and be executed. So let's look at specific CEO fraud. This is a phishing attack that usually exploits the influence of senior executives that have a low-level roles to make them transfer money or forward confidential information. In May of this year, FBI in America warned that CEO cyber fraud has surged. And we can see that, it's not that difficult now with information out there to be able to gather the information, create the fish, look back from the response of those type of people, execute the damage, and actually get a result from it. So CEO fraud now, as the FBI is stating, is over a $5 billion phishing scam. So this is why it will probably not go away anytime soon, and people are still using it. There are generally 4 methods of attack. The standard phishing email, which is non-targeted in general, but is high volume to hit a lot of people in your organization. The spear phishing attack, which tends to be over a smaller, more targeted user base that's used some information that they already know and purported coming perhaps from suppliers or vendors or other customers from your organization. Also, executive whaling, or really targeted spear phishing attack, which is spoofing in from executives internally into the organization to get an action from them. And of course, all of that is coupled together with social engineering, which, as we've seen, is now generally conducted online. Gone are the days of dumpster diving and telephoning. Most of that information is actually out there online to find from it. Earlier this year, Action Fraud and the National Fraud Intelligence Bureau warned that medical practices are looking at a significant increase in the number of targeted attacks in the sector. It generally is initiated with a phishing email that looks like it's been sent from the CEO, followed up perhaps by a phone call, some social engineering to make that inquiry seem more legit. There are some baseline measures we can look at to put in place to prevent this type of attack, like reviewing the internal procedures of how transactions are requested and improved within your organization to cut down on that risk that it can be actions just from a simple email. Ensure that your staff are fully aware of the methods of attack. Have they been security awareness trained? Are they aware and can spot phishing emails? Check the email addresses and telephone numbers if any transactions are requested. If there is an email, pick up the phone, double check it. And if in doubt, if it looks potentially suspicious, it probably is, do request further information. It's not just the NHS that are targeted with these type of attacks. Obviously, that crosses all vectors, but it's interesting information. So even bigger names can fall victim to sophisticated phishing attacks. Google and Facebook have both publicly confirmed that they fell victim to a phishing attack, although neither of them will confirm exactly how much they paid out. The cyber criminal was a 48-year-old Lithuanian man who was arrested, luckily, in March this year. So how did he manage to exploit money out of Google and Facebook? Well, he created various bank accounts in the name of a supplier that supplies both Google and Facebook. And he worked so it looked like it was a legitimate company. He then sent lots of phishing emails with forged documents, contracts, letters, invoices, at which point Facebook and Google authorized funds and the payment was made. Google and Facebook both paid them amounts, and then the cyber criminal basically bounced and wired the cash around various accounts to lots of different countries trying to hide it. In 3 years, it is reported that he extracted $100,000 out of these people. Now, luckily, he had left traces of his finances around, so he was eventually arrested and done that. But if Google and Facebook can fall for this type of thing, lots of other companies can. They probably wouldn't have done, depending on which users, and if they were trained and spotted those phishing emails and potentially reported them. In May this year, DocuSign announced that they'd fallen victim to a phishing attack. So what happened here? Well, they were hacked and customer emails were compromised. Then the attacker used those emails to send out purporting to be DocuSign, asking them to download a Word document. It's not common practice for DocuSign to ask users to download a Word document, but many of the recipients were filled for that. But if they were cautious and thought about it and perhaps had gone through some training or reported this, perhaps they weren't done. But it does show that after a hack and customer emails out there, if you do these type of phishing attacks reporting to be from a reputable company, you can in fact infect the people with malware. So let's look at defensive strategies after we've gone through what's out there, that's generally out there, as we would say, as a minimum. So all of you out there looking at the endpoints will have antivirus and anti-malware installed on those laptops, and that's a great start from there. You might even employ some sandboxing for high-end malware that can, identify zero-day threats, etc. What's very important is an effective patching routine. Most of the malware out there is trying to exploit a known vulnerability, and a good patching policy and having all your software up to date on your endpoint mitigates a lot of that malware risk. I'm sure we all have effective backup and restores. In fact, if we're talking about ransomware, that is well worth double checking and make sure it's good within your organization, because unless you're going to pay the ransom, an effective restore from a good backup is your only exit out of a ransomware attack. With regard to perimeter controls, we'll all have firewalls, and perhaps next generation firewalls that can do that little bit more at the gateway. And we've all got email security out there and web security to look at content that flows through into your organization. Data leakage prevention actually is quite interesting and can help at your perimeter control, not necessarily identifying an attack coming in, but if you have been affected and the malware is trying to leak some of your data out to the internet, data leakage prevention at the gateway can trigger and perhaps protect your information from being leaked. I'm sure out there also we've got policy controls, internet usage policies, acceptable usage policies, and if you've gone through any compliance, as example ISO 27001, you might have looked at some risk management around your organization and identified that. They are standard defense strategies, but are you looking at your users as a defense strategy? Remember, your employees are basically your first and last line of defense against cyber attacks. Are you testing your users? Are you training your users? But just as importantly, are you retesting and retraining your users and being able to measure the effectiveness of this? In many cases that we have dealt with, when we've looked at forensically after a malware attack or a ransomware attack, we can generally trace these attacks to a situation in time where a user is sat looking at an email with an attachment and a delete button. And if they've hit the delete button, the company's safe, but if they double tick the attachment, they get infected. It's your users. Although all the technical controls are there, technical controls cannot be 100% effective 100% of the time. So don't forget about your users as a part of this defense strategy. Talking about security awareness training, we've seen this awareness training go through a few points over the time. Perhaps in the old days, people used to sit back and rely on technical controls. I think we all are aware that we have these technical controls in our organization, but we still see phishing emails, so it's not something that we can rely on now. You may have moved on to do security awareness training by death by point, where you get everybody in a room, feed them coffee and cake, and give them a bit of training. But it's very difficult to measure the effectiveness of that training. Are the users actually taking that information in? What's good is sending security emails about every month about new and emerging threats from the internet. That's still a positive thing, and we would certainly support that. But again, are your users picking that up? Are they reading it? Are they taking it in? And it's a difficult thing to measure. You might have even done some phishing tests, be that internally or perhaps used a tool where you've perhaps sent some simulated phishing emails in and identified those people who have clicked and perhaps even trained them internally if you've identified them. But what we're talking about today is the Human Firewall, is ongoing company-wide exposure, testing and training, but retesting and retraining and measuring and quantifying what you are doing to be able to know that what you are doing is being effective in your organization. So let's take a little time about mitigation techniques and how this all gets pulled together, and how with phishing, simulated phishing attacks and security awareness training working together, we can set up a system that helps your company mitigate these attacks. So what should the first thing should we do? We should quantify our risk using security testing. And security testing, we mean sending in simulated phishing emails. We would suggest that the first thing you would do is send out a no-knowledge phishing test. This records a baseline prone percentage. This gets you to know how much of a risk to phishing you are. We would then suggest you make users aware that you are doing this in the company. We will be sending you simulated phishing emails and recording it. It raises awareness throughout the organization. We wouldn't tell them what email and when, just sometime that it will be tested. And this, as I said, helps raise awareness in the company. We can also identify user communities that might be more exposed to phishing within your organization. A good example of that is perhaps those people that look after distribution boxes like info@your-domain. These are on the internet, freely available for bots to find. So there's a good chance these are on a lot of spam lists, etc. So they might get a lot more phishing emails into that distribution box than a person that only has his own personal email address. So identify those user communities. Look at your risks within your organizations. When we're talking about testing for simulated phishing attacks, it's not just link clicking that we can look for. We should really be looking for, will they open attachments? Are they potentially users exposed to leaking data out your organization? Can they be fooled to click on a link, open a website and put their information into it? We should also suggest that keep that security testing across multiple topics. General emails, or social media, perhaps banking, vector specific, etc. It keeps the users vigilant and being able to spot these type of emails. And if you are 27001 or other compliance that's within your organization, this type of thing can help you with that compliance because it demonstrates continual improvement. If you continually test your users, it demonstrates that you are taking information security seriously across that and does help meet compliance regulations. So let's look at an example of how a security test in operation actually could work. So here's an email that is supposedly come from Salesforce talking about your Salesforce account and asking you to click on a link. Looks pretty genuine, but to be honest, there are a couple of red flags on the email that users should spot. support@salesforce-security.com is not a valid domain. And if you hovered over that link, it would not take you to the salesforce.com website. So there's a couple of things on there that are doing that. The other red flags is it's asking for a pretty immediate action, which most phishing emails do, be that a positive or a negative. However, let's say we send this email into all your users. If the users did click on that email, they would be taken to a spoofed website that looks like Salesforce but is not. This way we can identify a couple of sets of users. We can identify those users that perhaps have opened the email and clicked the link, so we fooled them into clicking the link, but have gone no further. Well, they really need to get some security awareness training because they did manage to click that link, so they didn't spot the red flags that were on that email. Perhaps some of the users clicked the link, went on the spoof website, and it did actually input their user information. Well, those users not only should be going on security awareness training, but data leakage training becomes important for these people as well, because we managed to fool them in the email, but also the spoof website. So there's an example of how security operation comes in. Talking about security awareness training, how do we adopt this in a company? What's the best practice? Well, we feel absolutely that any training within an organization should be endorsed at board level. So it should be promoted and endorsed at that level. So all the people in your organization know the company's serious about security awareness training. We see every user that has an email box and can receive external emails as a potential attack. So when we offer baseline training, it should be to all users. There should be no really exceptions in your organization there. Anybody is an attack vector in there, so everybody should be trained. You could look at providing specific training to relevant users based on any testing results you do. So if, as we've seen previously, that we found users that are susceptible to leaking data out of it, we might want to look at running data leakage or more targeted training for those users. But also we could look at CEO fraud or for your executives, or looking at sensitive information handling, for example, for your finance or HR department. Or perhaps the accounts department might also look at attachment handling because they receive a lot of invoices and purchase ordering. How do we spot that? And it's important to report on training being undertaken. Keep the information. Make sure that you're reporting it well and keeping that, because you can advise line managers within your organization things like take up on the training, who's taking it, who's not taking it. So what should be in a very base way covered under security training? Well, here's a couple of points that we do on a do nots. So we should be training our users not to click links without hovering over them. This is a classic phishing one, and it's what they all do, whether it's a button, whether it's an image, whether it's a link. Hover over that, look at where that's going. If it's not going to the same place that it's purporting to go to, it's probably suspicious and should be reported. Don't open executable attachments. That becomes ever difficult in modern days because Word documents and Excel documents can have executable macros in them, so can PDF documents. So it's not just looking out for the executables, it's also looking out for those type of documents that may or may not have active content into them. Do not respond to spam. It's quicker to delete. Spam may be spam and not malicious, but if you respond to spam, you get onto the spam lists. And this is where in the dark web, that the phishers actually pick up these type of lists and therefore send in more malicious stuff. It's far easier to hit a delete button than it is to try and respond to a spam. And similar with unsubscribe. This is what the spammers and the phishers do. They try and trick you into either, embarrassment of the email content or something, trying to hit you to the unsubscribe button. It's a lot easier to hit the delete button and safer than it is to hit the unsubscribe button if you're unsure. What should they be doing in the security awareness training? They should be checking the from address, as it may be spoofed. As we've seen previously, salesforce-security.com is not a valid domain. This is useful information to give your users. Look out for those type of domains. A nice little trick that the phishers do is do double extensions. So they might attach a safe.txt.ext to an email. Generally on most systems, it does not show the extension. So user may be looking at a safe.txt attachment in their email and think it's safe to open. It is not. As we said, check domains. Support.microsoft.software is not real. Check these type of things. Even when you hover over a link and it purports to go to a Microsoft site, is it a real site? The cyber criminals can register these type of domains that look very close to real ones, but it may not be. But the most important thing is report suspicious emails to your support department. If you think or have the slightest inkling that it is suspicious, it probably is. Running supports, these guys will be much more happy to check out a valid email and say it's valid than for you to not report a suspicious email and infect the company. So always make sure you support it. We talked a little bit before about security awareness reporting, and it really is an important part of any simulated phishing and training system that you're going to adopt in your company, because it gives you the metrics around how you are doing and is it being effective in your organization. So if you do a simulated phishing attack, ensure that every campaign that you do, you report at a user level and perhaps at a group level, so all the users within HR. That allows you to look at your overall phishing exposure, but also to look at department phishing exposures, because some departments handle a lot more sensitive information than others. So it's nice to know that your HR and finance department have a lower phishing percentage prone than other departments because they handle more data. Make sure you record this users who are prone to phishing or perhaps data extraction. It's important to know what people do on these simulated phishing emails. If the tool or yourself is allowed, try and report date timestamps on open, clicked, if they've opened an attachment, if they've entered data. This is great information to look at and analyze further on down the line. And if possible, it's interesting to be able to report cards per users that would include the phishing history as well as the training, so you can see whether your training has been effective on users specifically. So let's look at this over a full service timeline as how we see that we would suggest you adopt this type of mitigation techniques. So let's take a 12-month standard year and have a look at how we do that. As we originally mentioned previous in the slide deck, is the first thing we would do is get a baseline no knowledge test. Let's get some emails out to everybody's inbox and see what they're clicking. This is your starting point. This tells you, once you've measured that information, how prone you are to phishing. We would then suggest that everybody goes through security awareness training. As previously mentioned, when we say all, we do mean all. CEO downwards within the organization. No one should be really exempt from this phishing. If they can receive an email, they are an attack vector. But to measure the importance of this and get the metrics around of it, we suggest that you would carry out a phishing security test every month, as an example. This allows you to measure the percentage of how prone you are month on month on month on month, and it allows you to be able to track that over time to know what you are doing is being effective. But you shouldn't be also afraid of training clickers. If a user perhaps receives a baseline email and doesn't click on it and goes through the training, that's great. But perhaps 6 months down the line, they are fooled by one of the emails they receive and they do click it. We shouldn't be afraid to train those clickers. The training might have gone out the head, they may not have been thinking. It's important to keep this in the forefront of people's mind. Being able to train these users and giving them as a defense strategy and a part of your defenses against this type of thing, they have to have all of this information to the forefront of the mind and being able to spot these type of emails. So it's important that we train the clickers. And after that 12-month period, we would suggest that that is absolutely repeated again. Do another baseline test, retrain all the users. The threats on the internet now are completely different from the threats of the internet 5 years previously. We've got to keep our users up to date on what's out there and what's being popular. So how can this affect your company? Well, taking real figures from a company, when they did their first line baseline test, they were 15% phish prone. That's probably a little below average, not too bad. But what did this company do with regard to the percentage that 15 people out of 100 actually click simulated phishing emails? Well, they did continuously monthly testing. Every month they tested their users to be able to ensure that the users, it's at the forefront of their mind. And they carried out general and targeted awareness training. How did this happen? Well, it got it down to just under 2%, which is a great improvement from 15%. You may ask, why wasn't it zero? Well, within any organization that has, a good decent amount of numbers, there is probably people who are going to click somewhere out there. So it may be difficult to get down to zero. It should not be every company's goal to be 0% phish prone, but probably in practice, people will do that. There may be new starters, not gone through the training, etc., etc. But the point about it is also due to the fact that we're recording and reporting and getting all those metrics, we can plot this and we can find out that what we have done for this company has been effective in mitigating their risks for what they have done. So how can Sapphire help you with everything around that? Well, Sapphire offer a phishing and awareness and training service, but we're not limited to this. We've been around for 21 years and offer an extensive range of services and solutions. We've got technical expertise with regard to what we previously discussed around the endpoint, policies, and perimeter devices. We've also got incident response teams that can provide rapid remediation advice in the case of an incident. We also obviously have policy and writing compliance and help you with that awareness program as well within your organization. And we also offer what we've talked about is a free phishing test and report for all our users. That phishing test, and thank you very much for your time, is cloud-based, and so we don't have to put anything in your organization, and can be set up fairly quickly. We do require a bit of whitelisting through because we're not testing your technologies, we're testing your users. So the simulated phishing emails that we'll send in and duly report on, we do need to be addressed to the users. But we would encourage you to take up that free trial. As I say, very limited impact on yourselves, and it'll give you an idea of what your phishing exposure is and whether you need to address this more or less within your organization. So thank you very much for your time. I'll hand you back to Tina if there's any questions. Thank you.